So the Ant-Man is absolutely ruining the love fest between Luka Doncic and LeBron James. Ant-Man earlier in the day went for 43 points in the Minnesota Timberwolves win over the Los Angeles Lakers. Welcome back to the NBA Rundown. On today's show, we are going to talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves, who quite frankly were pretty disrespected before coming into this series against the Los Angeles Lakers. I've got all of that, and as always, a lot more on the big show today. All right, so we begin with the Minnesota Timberwolves actually taking down the Los Angeles Lakers in beautiful Minnesota. Nobody ever says that. 116-113 was the final. And for those of you that haven't actually followed the Minnesota Timberwolves pretty closely over the last couple of years, I can absolutely tell you what we are seeing both on and off the court with Ant-Man is a completely different player than early in his career. Now, of course, the Ant-Man is, if you will, maturing before our very eyes. Look, during these post-game press conferences, he almost always begins by giving credit to some of the other players on the team that actually helped his team actually pull off the win. Now, case in point, in today's post-game press conference with Lisa Salters from ABC/ESPN, whatever they're calling themselves these days, he actually credits Naz Reid with having a big game. Now, Naz was certainly big down the stretch, but he ended the game with just 12 points. He also credited Jaden McDaniels, who had another big game statistically with 11 rebounds, 3 assists, and 16 points. He also credited Dante DiVincenzo, who had 8 points, 2 assists, and 2 rebounds in the game. What we're actually seeing before our very eyes is the birth of a potential true National Basketball Association superstar. Now, I began by talking about how the Minnesota Timberwolves were actually underrated and probably shouldn't have been underrated coming into this series against the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, it's pretty simple when you actually think about it. The Los Angeles Lakers had one more win during the regular season than the Minnesota Timberwolves did, which of course allows a lot of people to immediately think that that team is light years ahead of all the other teams when it was really just one win more than the Minnesota Timberwolves had. We'll get into the Luka Doncic factor here in a minute as well. But I think the other thing that has been completely brushed aside and, if you will, has been shoved underneath the bed to be found at a later date is the fact that this Minnesota Timberwolves team, largely the same team minus Cat in exchange for Julius Randle, who had a big game today again, finished with 25 points. But the big thing that was absolutely shoved underneath the bed to be found at a later date was the fact that this Minnesota Timberwolves team, which surprised a lot of people last season, ended up actually in the Western Conference Finals last year. Now, we always hear people in the media talking about how important it is to gain experience. You've got to gain experience first before you can ever really do a lot of damage. And with that particular theory in mind, when you actually think about where this Minnesota Timberwolves team is as we sit here 4 games into this series against the Luka LeBron Lovefest with the Los Angeles Lakers, you have to remember that this is a team largely intact, pretty much the same team minus Cat for Julius Randle, who Julius Randle has absolutely found his legs and, if you will, his position in the game on the offensive side as well as the defensive side of Chris Finch's team and the Minnesota Timberwolves at this point. Julius Randle actually looks extremely comfortable. Now, Cat is actually doing really well with the New York Knicks. as we know. But largely, this is pretty much the same team with the addition of Dante DiVincenzo that went all the way to the Western Conference Finals last year. So I'm not surprised at all that this Minnesota Timberwolves team is actually putting up a really big fight. Such a big fight that you can probably see where I'm going with this, which is the Los Angeles Lakers should have never been favored in this particular series. That's not to say a team with LeBron James and Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves isn't fully capable of coming back and winning this series in 7, because that's what it's going to take if the Los Angeles Lakers are actually going to win this thing. Look, Austin Reeves has to play better in the first half of the games. He played better in the second half of the game today. But when you really sit back, and if you were to go back and watch the film of the last couple games, you will see that these games are actually very close. And the big difference is some coaching adjustments that are actually being made, not necessarily between games, but actually during the games themselves. And I think in JJ Redick's defense, he doesn't necessarily have the same tools that Chris Finch does, the head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, when it comes to actually putting out different types of offenses and defenses. In other words, his bench is significantly deeper and actually includes a couple rim protectors, where Rob Pelinka, who got that big new contract, didn't actually do a good job of that. But you can't knock Pelinka, because Pelinka has actually pulled off the coup of the century in bringing one Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, LeBron is just absolutely amazing. We saw what he did the other night. He continued a lot of that today. I mean, his stat line for a 40-year-old is absolutely amazing. Seriously. LeBron had 12 rebounds in the game, 8 assists, and 27 points. The much younger Luka Doncic, who's generally a very good rebounder and is also good at actually generating a lot of opportunities for other players on his team, didn't do much of that at all today. 38 points, that was great, but this was another game in this particular series where Luka hasn't had a lot of rebounds and hasn't had a lot of assists. And it's yet another game that the Los Angeles Lakers have lost. When Luka actually contributes more assists in the game, he tends to actually get the rest of the team involved, and then the Lakers ultimately end up winning. So here we are. We're now 3 days away. You have to wait 3 nights until the next Los Angeles Laker Minnesota Timberwolves game, which will be on Wednesday night in beautiful, and I do mean this, beautiful Los Angeles. And when the game tips off, the Minnesota Timberwolves will have the Los Angeles Lakers on the brink. The Timberwolves are leading the series 3-1. Now, in terms of Anthony Edwards and what he's actually done on the court, what you see with Anthony Edwards on the court during the playoffs is a little bit different than what you would have seen with Anthony Edwards during the regular season. The Ant-Man during the regular season seemed to have, as we all know, fallen in love with Steph Curry during the Olympics last year and learned to shoot a three-point shot. So much so that he actually led the league in three-point shooting this year. But during the playoffs, we've seen Anthony Edwards, at least to this point, actually do what he is so dangerous at, which is actually going downfield. And when we see Anthony Edwards actually driving to the basket, especially against a team that doesn't necessarily have a lot of rim protection, you can see what has happened. Now, Anthony has also made a lot of clutch threes in this particular series as well. I'm not saying he's completely forgot about what he did during the regular season, but if you were to go watch footage of Anthony Edwards from the regular season and compare his offensive output in the playoffs so far, and if you look at the strategy that he's actually playing at this point versus what he did during the regular season, you can tell that, if you will, during the regular season, maybe he had his foot off the gas pedal a bit. Remember, this is a Minnesota Timberwolves team that last year went all the way to the Western Conference Finals, which is why I know there is a Luka Doncic on the Los Angeles Lakers playing with LeBron James, having Austin Reeves. There are a couple other nice pieces, Lovefest going on in Los Angeles. But is it really justified to actually have the Los Angeles Lakers, who had home court advantage when the playoff series started, being as such a big favorite over the Minnesota Timberwolves as they were entering this series? And the answer to that question is, of course, absolutely not. All right, love to know your thoughts and opinions on this topic. Please go ahead and drop them in when you have a chance. As always, for the NBA Rundown, I'm Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this,